welcome to my first episode of Beccamendations from an Endo Warrior. I'm fully expecting this episode to be like the first pancake you make and be an absolute flop, but I'm really at the point now where I think I would love to share my story and hear about other stories about the journey everyone has been on with endometriosis, whether that be your personal story, your friend's story, your sister's story, your girlfriend's story, anyone who you love's story, just because it's such a huge part of my life and it's been quite tricky to say the least, but I just wanted to have a really positive podcast, mainly just about girl chat, but kind of underpinned by my endo journey. So I think it's best to start by introducing myself. So my name is Rebecca, but you can call me Becca because I feel like we're friends at this point, considering you've decided to put me in your ears. And I'm just a normal 25-year-old girl trying to navigate life, whether that be trying to climb the ladder in my career, relationships, and also my health. And yeah, like I said, I do really want to flip endo into being a positive, and try and stay away from all the statistics about endometriosis and all of the scary stuff, or acknowledge it but kind of see how we can be positive about it and move on together. Now I'm fully aware that there are many endo groups online, which I'm sure are amazing, but if I'm totally honest, I've been absolutely petrified to join them because there's been so much about kind of comparing each other, who's got the worst endo, if someone's really got endo, whether they are in enough pain and all of this. And I know that the kind of more negative people tend to be the loudest, but I really don't want this podcast to be anything to do with that. And I would love it if this could just be a positive podcast and just acknowledge that everyone's journey is different and it doesn't matter. Like, pain is such a subjective thing. Like, someone can, pain is just, I don't think it's something that should be out there to be judged. So I think it's best if I start with a brief background of my story, especially with regard to endo, and then maybe let's go from there. So I think it probably all started about 15 years ago when I started my periods, and I would notice that my friends would be maybe a bit grumpy when they were on theirs, or kind of just not themselves, or sometimes be in a bit of pain, but mine was just so much worse. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but not that mine was worse, but it would last for 3 weeks at a time. It would be beyond painful. I would be embarrassed. I couldn't wear tampons. I'd have to be going through 8 pads a day. Absolutely mortified. Didn't want to talk to anyone about it. Pretended I was completely normal. Had the worst bloating. But then on top of this, I developed extreme nausea to the point that I was put on the same medication that people having chemotherapy have. And I was on that for 2 or 3 years, and every time I went to the doctor I heard, it's just a teenage girl problem. Are you stressed? Are you being bullied? Are you having this? Are you having that? If you got anxiety, we know it's difficult to be a girl your age, it will pass, all of this. And I was like, no, my tummy is hurting a lot, so I'm feeling down. Like, that's why I'm feeling down. It's not the other way around. And I felt like I was kind of bashing against the wall permanently, just trying to get people to believe me. And I was tested for Crohn's disease. I was tested for mites in my gut. I was tested for everything and nothing showed up. And that's until about 2 years ago when I called my GP, and can I just add, this goes in waves where you're like, okay, I'm going to really tackle this. I'm going to really find out what's wrong with me. I'm going to just give it my full attention, which firstly, I just really wish that would change. But as I've done a brief search, I think that's not uncommon in the endo space. And my doctor said, oh, have you been tested for endometriosis? I was like, for endo what? And she was like, yeah, you've got all the symptoms. Then I got referred to a proper gynecologist, and then I was diagnosed with endometriosis, as much as you can be, without having a laparoscopy. I mean, sorry if I've got that wrong. And yeah, and I don't really feel comfortable enough going into the ins and outs of what happened in that consultation room, but it was mortifying, and I was basically told, oh, you don't know what endo is. It basically means that you're likely to be infertile off your pop kind of situation. And I got out of the appointment. My mum had come with me, and she was like, what's happened? What did they say? And I just said, yeah, I've got endo. And I was numb. I was completely fine. And then it was the hospital was about an hour away. And after about 45 minutes, I just uncontrollably started crying. And I think it's because, you know, you don't really think about having children in practical terms, but when you're told you can't, it's very scary. And now I've learned that there's a high chance I'm not infertile. It's just not it's not been confirmed. Nothing, and he should never have said that. But then, because that kind of incident kind of scared me so much, I then got a second opinion, and they tested me for endo again via ultrasound, and I just want to say this didn't pick up anything on the scan, but there were traces of adenomyosis. And I'm very new to these terms, so I'm not sitting here pretending to be some sort of expert. I'm not at all. What I am an expert on is how I feel, and I want to use this as almost a therapy session for myself, as well as help as many people as I can, if possible. So then my life changed drastically. I moved from the middle of the countryside to the heart of London, doing a master's degree, and it was just too much. I was absolutely in agony all the time. I was looking like I was living my best life, but I was in the most amount of pain. So they put me on the depot injection, and I'm going to do an episode about that later because I think that's a whole topic in itself. But now I'm pretty much, I mean, that's a whistle-stop tour of my endo journey. But now I'm at the stage where I'm waiting for my preoperative appointment for my laparoscopy. I really need to learn how to say that properly. And yeah, I think it's just a very scary time because it's the unknown. I'm kind of more scared that, you know, they're going to do this investigation and they won't be able to remove any of the endo or find any of the endo, or they'll have to do another operation, and it's just a scary time to be in. So I thought, what better time than to launch a podcast and share with anyone who wants any sort of advice or just to listen in and find out what it's like to be, I don't want to say what it's like to have endo, because I think everyone is just so different, and we really need to stop saying, oh, well, endo shouldn't be like this, or where has that judgment come from? That's just, it's not great, and it needs to be a more supportive environment. And every girl or those assigned female at birth will know what the pain of a period is. So I think as well I've got a bit of a duty to relay to men how they can support their women or their female friends or women in their life, just because it's a pain that I'm not sure is super relatable, because it's unlike anything. Whereas to my friends, I'll say it's like a period times 100, but it's all the time and it's always there. And there's different symptoms, which I'll go through my symptoms in another podcast, but I don't think that's crucial. I think what is crucial is just being positive and seeing how we can all help each other. So, circling back now, I think the way that I really would like this podcast to go is to just be super positive, have hopefully have some interviews with some people down the line. But I think for this series, I'm going to keep it just between myself and you, so we can get to know each other. So my plan is to release a podcast every week for the next 10 weeks. And then hopefully we'll get a series 2. And by that point, I really hope to interview people and get my friends in, my family in. And hopefully by then I'll have more connections with endo people, or people who suffer with endo, or people who know people with endo. I've just created a label there, endo people. But I think, this podcast has obviously been quite brief, just because I think it's really important that you get a background of me and why I've started this podcast. But in the future, I would really love to touch on how I actually felt in the consultation room in a bit more depth, and kind of the body image impact it's had on me, and the whole journey of getting diagnosed and getting through my day at work and keeping a brave face, and how I use diet and exercise and making doctors believe me. And also I think I'd love to do an episode on how you can support people who suffer with endometriosis best, because I think sometimes, especially the people who surround me, sometimes they feel a little bit helpless, which they absolutely shouldn't. But I would like to kind of explore that a bit, and hopefully I can do that with some of my friends and family, so you don't just always hear my perspective on things. But with that in mind, I have decided to call the podcast Beccamendations from an Endo Warrior. And I'd just like to, in this episode, explore my reasoning behind that. So those of you who know me know that I love a play on words. And I think with my friends and family, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I've got a beccamendation for you. And I just thought, why not use it? Why not be a bit fun? So that's where that part came from. And then the other part came from the word endo warrior. When I first started Googling what endometriosis was, all these endo warriors popped up, and I thought, oh, warrior. I didn't know if it was a bit twee, or I didn't know how I felt about it. But now I thought, actually, you know what? It is a fight you fight every single day, and it is a silent fight most of the time. Shouldn't be after I've launched this podcast, hopefully. But it is a fight, and I think if you think of yourself as a warrior, it's positive, and it's nice to think of yourself and others like that. So